get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ranja Angia-Basios. I'm with the Atlanta Regional Commission. I am the Outreach Manager for Georgia Commute Options. Thank you for joining us today on this, well, most of us are here on the East Coast. It's a little bit cloudy today, but thanks for joining us. And for those in the West Coast, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. And we have, I'm hoping for a really great conversation today because we have two amazing guest speakers who are thought leaders in the space. And it's going to be a great conversation about hybrid work in this space. So next slide, please, Paige. So we have an agenda today for our webinar. We're going to do a brief welcome and introduction for our guest speakers. The audience don't have to introduce themselves, but if you like, you can drop in the chat where you are currently dialing in from. And we're going to do an interview style kind of webinar today with our two guest speakers and our Flexwork team. And then one of our consultants is going to go over the GCO Flexwork service that we do provide, and then we'll allocate some time for some Q&A at the end. But throughout, if you do have questions for our guests, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll get to them during the Q&A. So most of you probably know who we are, but for those of you who don't, we are Georgia Commute Options. We are funded by the Georgia Department of Transportation and managed by the Atlanta Regional Commission. Our goal essentially is to reduce congestion and to improve air quality in our region. And we do this by working with employers, commuters, schools all throughout our 20-county region. And we offer free services to encourage people to choose alternative commute options. And that include carpooling, van pooling, teleworking or flex work, flexible work arrangements, biking, transit, don't forget transit. And yeah, so that's about Georgia Commute Options. And we're gonna allocate some time to talk a little bit more about the flexible work arrangement portion, which is what this webinar is about. So we're gonna go ahead and introduce our speakers. Next slide, please. So our Flexwork team consists of Elham, Shirazi, and Robin Mack. I'm going to start with Elham. Elham has over almost a decade, 4 decades of experience in developing telework and flexible schedule program. She has expertise developing resources for us. We've been working with her for years, and she's been great with helping employers with their Flexwork options. And she's joined by Robin Mack, who has almost 2 decades of experience in this space. Robin is located in Virginia area, in the DMV area, and she has been doing a lot of great work there for the Virginia State Agency. She started almost 20 years ago, and it is actually a award-winning program that she led over there. So we are very lucky to have her be part of the team as well. So together, her and Elham bring wealth of knowledge and expertise. And then we are joined by locally by Dr. Patricia Mokhtarian. She is a Regents Professor at Georgia Institute of Technology. She has specialized in the study of attitudinal influences on travel behavior for more than 45 years. So we're among people with very great knowledge in the area, in this industry. She's received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Association for Travel Behavior Research in 2021, and she's been elected to the U.S. National Academy of Engineering in 2024. And we are also joined by Kate Lister, who is the president of Global Workplace Analytics. It is a research-based consulting firm that has been helping organizations optimize flexible and distributed work for nearly 2 decades. Again, there's just a lot of knowledge here amongst our guests, so you're in for a treat, attendees. She is a trusted source of insights about the future of work for news outlets like New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Newsweek. So she is nationally and internationally known. She has she helps and let me see. She has written or contributed to 6 books and a suite of e-learning courses aimed at helping managers and employees develop practices and skills to make distributed work more effective, efficient, and equitable and it has been licensed to over 1 million employees and boasts satisfaction ratings of 97%. So she's very knowledgeable in the workplace analytics, which we like data-based information here. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass it on to our consultant, Elham Shirazi, who's going to be moderating the conversation and asking our guest speaker questions.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Ranja. And good morning to, I'm sorry, good noon, I would say, to all of those on the East Coast. So I'm going to go through some questions. Some of them one of the speakers may address, some of them both may address. And and please don't forget your questions. So you do put them in the chat and we will eventually get to them or write them down for now so you don't forget them. Let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to address these first two or three questions to Kate. Kate, let's start with the first one, which is, what are workplaces getting wrong with hybrid work at this stage? And Pat, if you feel like adding, you can just go ahead and add when Kate is done. Go ahead, Kate, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Elham. Thank you for that introduction. I'd like to start out, if you don't mind, just sort of setting the stage with the numbers out there. There's a lot of confusion. You hear all kinds of numbers. My favorite source is Nick Bloom at Stanford. He's been doing it for a long time. His work is very respected. And so the numbers I'm going to quote here are from him. Right now, about 30% of all employees work from home at least 1 day a week. And that's been stable since November of 2023. So, we hear all this thing about return to office and all of that. It's not making as big a difference as people think. Among people with compatible jobs, right? So that's the whole workforce. But among people with compatible jobs, half of the workforce is working hybrid. About 30% are fully remote, and about 20% are fully in the office, and about half of them don't want to be. Atlanta's numbers are about the same, but actually a percentage of compatible industries is higher, so we might expect that to be higher. And in terms of industry, the biggest industries are IT jobs, low is hospitality, and in all of them, in about the 40% of employees working at home some of the time includes the IT industry, as I said, finance and professional services. So those are the real big ones. So what are they doing wrong? The biggest thing is that they've changed the way people are working, but not the how. So think about when we first got cell phones, a lot of people only used them in the house. And when we got smartphones, we still only used them to make phone calls. We're sort of doing that. We're working in new ways, but with old practices and processes. And what that means is that, well, first of all, if anything goes wrong, you blame it on remote work. And we're seeing a lot of that blame game. Oh, productivity's down. Well, it's not down because of hybrid work. It's down because of bad management. I mean, I'm not speaking out of school. Nick Bloom will tell you the same thing. So they're not going to maximize the potential of this unless they get those practices and processes to catch up with the way people are working. And the other thing is, we've still got the same things that have been bugging telework for 40 years, and that's management mistrust. But that also goes back to the practices and processes. I haven't taught managers how to manage people on remote teams. In fact, 75% have not provided training for managers, 75% have not provided best practice for employees, and 75% of employers have not established team norms or meeting norms. Those are real fundamental things. So that's, it can get a lot better.
Okay. Pat, did you want to add anything or should I keep going?
Let's keep going for now. I'll
going.
add later.
Okay, I would just like to add something to that. I'm not going to add to everything. Obviously, you all know a lot, but I have seen that one of the biggest problems we're facing is that a lot of employers have started hoteling, and if they've been lucky enough, they have renegotiated their leases and freed up space. And then now, their management suddenly wants to bring people back, but they don't have enough space. So there is, there's a lot going on in the space issue, and how space is being used in the office as employers change their mind. And although actually, let's keep going on that train of thought, Kate. Why are managers changing their minds now? Why are executive management, kind of a lot of the big companies, of course.
You mean in terms of coming back?
Yeah.
A lot of it goes to trust. A lot of the numbers that we hear of the recalls are at the same time as layoffs. And so, you tell people they need to be in the office 5 days a week, and you've got a lot of people that will quit, and then you don't have to pay them when you lay them off. And these have been proven. These numbers, who do they come from? I'll think about it. And in this same academic study, it showed that the biggest return to office are at organizations with high-powered men, white men, older, high-powered white men. And, they want to have their people around. And, they'll throw out that it's productivity, or that our culture is declining, or that we're not innovating, or whatever. And when I ask, any CEO, and how do you know that? What have you done to study that or to prove it? And they don't. It's a feeling. And these recalls are being made out of feelings, and it's insulting to the people that have been working home and being productive all of this time. And so there's a big angst, and I think this plays out in terms of employee trust, in terms of turnover, although now we're in kind of an employer's market. So I'm not, that's kind of faded for now, but it'll come back.
Okay, thank you for that. What technology tools or workplace practices have we seen emerge in this space that we didn't have before?
We're seeing a lot of attention to employee experience. The employers that want their people back, some of them are learning that they need to earn the commute. People don't want to come in and sit on Zoom calls all day. And two things they want in particular are privacy. People want to come back. More than half of the remote workers say they will come. They want to come to the office, but you've got to make it worth my while. And I've got to know who's in. That's the second biggest thing. Who's going to be there? So, I want to be there when my manager's going to be there. I want to be there when my colleagues or my team is going to be there. And so there's technologies now that make all that apparent and make it easier to coordinate. And easier to find those sweet spot spaces. So I want a space today, or at least for this morning, where it's quiet and I can focus. I want a space this afternoon for my team, and you can just call up your cell phone and make all of those reservations. So I think those are the two biggest technologies. I think also the adoption of asynchronous practices.
Explain it, please.
I was just going to.
Thank you.
After the pandemic, we were just deluged with meeting. Everything had to be a meeting. And we learned, I think, a lot from the all remote companies that they do a lot of things where it doesn't have to be a meeting. We could collaborate on a shared document. I could send you a video message. We could create a single source of truth within the company, a knowledge base, so that you don't have to ask people this and that and everything. You can look it up. And that's probably been the slowest thing to change, but I think it's probably one of the most important things if we really want to maximize this practice.
Another complaint that we hear about, it's throughout the literature or articles, is the lack of collaboration and cooperation in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And I even see that with firms that have, that require people to be in on 2 certain days. And they still complain about collaboration or, amongst peers. So what can you share about that sphere?
The good companies, the companies that are doing this well, are actually looking at what a person does, breaking down the job. And this is important for transition to AI as well. So looking at what they do, there's this time of focus, there's this time of collaboration, there's this time of concentration, there's this time of social. And let's create spaces and places at the office that accommodate them. So we've gone from maybe a 70-30 me space, private space at the office to we space. Some have flipped that, which is too much, because you don't just come to the office and I'm going to collaborate all day long. You need to focus also. And so we need to shift that a little bit. But they're, intentionally creating spaces that are designed for collaboration, because that's what we're going to do at the office. And they're designed for socializing, because that's what we want to do at the office. And you can do your focus work other places.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let's switch now, and actually I'm going to ask questions that Pat probably is quite expert at. And Pat, can you speak to us a little bit about the commute? What is happening in the commute sphere? Do you see a difference? Are commutes shorter or longer? And are you, seeing maybe less frequent commutes, meaning in the peak hours, but then more trips throughout the day? And
Great
come
questions.
back
Yeah.
to you too. Sorry, Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. The commute question is complex. Probably all of us who commute realize we usually have a mix of schedules and modes, perhaps, times, departure times, both directions. So kind of getting a one-size-fits-all handle on what's happening with commuting is challenging. But so one question is residential relocation, right? So have people started moving farther from work because now they're more confident that they'll be able to telework, indefinitely? Honestly, that's happening, but it's hard to sort that out from the background trends in decentralization, commutes getting longer, that have been going on well before the pandemic, for decades. And once you start realizing, that people are moving farther out because that's the bigger house and the bigger yard and more affordable and nicer schools for the kids or whatever, then in my field, at least, the next question is teleworking the villain or the savior? Are people moving farther away for reasons unrelated to telework, but then telework swoops in and allows them to commute less often? And what's the net impact on their commute? Not always clear. If they move really far out, even if they're only coming in 2 days a week, it may still be longer commute distance total in a week than it was when they lived much closer and commuted 5 days a week. So in some cases, it's still a net, negative, if you will, for sustainability. But in many other cases, they're, even if they're living farther away, their reduced frequency of commuting is compensating. So, teleworking can be the solution then to a more distant move that was happening anyway. On the other hand, it's clear that in some cases, teleworking is the cause. Okay, now that I can telework 2 days a week or 3 days a week, that cabin near the lake up there 50 miles away looks more attractive, or whatever, the cheaper house in the far distant suburbs. So there's that going on. That's sort of the people still making commutes on the days that they go into the office. What's intrigued me a lot lately is what I would call partial day teleworking. So when we think hybrid, what I most often see talked about, including Nick Bloom's statistics, which I fully agree with Kate, are fantastic and so consistently measuring the same thing over multiple years, month after month. So I follow his work carefully as well. But his work and most others is measuring full day work from home or full day commuting. And it's hard to get a handle on the partial day telework, which I had always suspected is a huge amount of teleworking, where people work from home part of the day and then go into the regular workplace, or put in a full day at the regular workplace and then come back and work at home in the evenings, which in many statistics is still counted as teleworking. So we looked into it recently with the American Time Use Survey, which is a time use diary that documents what people do and more or less where they do it. So we could track work at home versus work outside the home. and found that about 1/3 of all teleworking days are these partial day teleworking. So a non-trivial proportion of teleworking days involve commutes. All partial day telework incidences involve a commute, and one or both directions of those commutes are most likely going to be in the peak period. How many of them will both be in the peak period? Among those 1/3 of teleworking days, about 3/4 of them are what we call supplemental teleworking, namely people put in more or less a full day at the regular workplace and commute both ways, probably in the peak, and either early in the morning before going to work or later in the evening after getting back, or both. They're still teleworking. So, you know, as somebody who's a detail-oriented person and wants to do a deep dive, it matters what flavor of teleworking you're talking about. Not all teleworking eliminates commutes, and not even eliminates peak period commutes. So maybe I'll stop there and let you get to the next.
Actually, Pat, I think I've always had a hard time explaining to people why this is such a complicated question. And I know from having worked with you in the past that you take a very conscientious approach to doing diaries and to doing, you know, actually even family diaries of what happens to other trips. Can you just for our participants explain why this is so complicated and never to take, I mean, to always question it with a grain of salt?
Because again, I think our lived experience bears that out. So if you have a family, if you have children, if two partners are both working, your schedule's pretty flexible, not flexible in the sense of you can do whatever you want, but can't possibly be the same every single day. The kid gets sick, or there's a school play that you simply must attend, or, you know, etc. So, you know, like I said, people need solutions, and partial day teleworking is a very good solution for a lot of people. Now, if you want to get to non-work trips, so part of your original question dealt with, are people making more trips during the day? And there again, we see a difference between the full day teleworkers who make the fewest trips. So for the most part, if they're working from home all day, not commuting at all, then yeah, they may make the occasional trip during the day, but it's fewer on total, and more toward the peak, evening peak, shall we say. So they're doing stuff sort of after the regular workday hours and maybe going out in the evening and so on. So the full day teleworkers, I must say, very benign in terms of transportation impacts. When it comes to partial day teleworkers, those supplementers, as we call them, you can think of them as overtime work from home, so to speak. They're just about as bad as commuters. They make the most trips, first of all, because they make both commutes and may do some evening work trips. Sorry, I said that wrong. They don't make the most trips. They make about the same trips and similar temporal distribution to regular commuters. Who makes the most trips are those what we call substituters. They work from home in the morning, but go into the workplace in the afternoon. And people like me who work at home in the morning and come in to teach in the afternoon. They make the most trips, and their temporal distribution of trips is all day long. Okay, there's still a couple of small peaks, but not nearly as much. And the noontime trough is not nearly as deep. So their trips are much more evenly distributed temporally across the day, and more of them, even, believe it or not, more work trips. So they're still making the commute trip both directions because they're only working at home part of the day. But apparently on average, a few of them make a second commute trip. And maybe it's because they live close enough to work that they go home for lunch and work an hour or two and go back. Not clear, what all that's all about. But it's those the substituters who are replacing some of their regular work time by working at home that make the most trips and the most spread across all day. What we're seeing in the aggregate is more midday trips, and a little bit post-pandemic, we were seeing reduced peak period travel. I think it's largely gone back to status quo ante. Certainly the evening peak is at least as bad as it used to be. Morning peak might still be a bit lighter, but by and large, the aggregate traffic patterns are pretty similar to what they were pre-pandemic.
So actually, you said that most of the teleworkings are occurring on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, because the information for employers really points to teleworking. Yes, teleworking happening Mondays and Fridays, but people coming to the office in the middle of the week.
Correct. Yeah, that's
okay.
yeah. Now, again, I don't know that it's the majority on Mondays and Fridays. I would just say more on Mondays and
Yes, yes.
Fridays than on other days of the week.
Okay, sorry. Kate, did you want to add to that discussion?
Yeah, a couple things.
ahead.
I don't know if everyone's heard the word coffee badging.
Yes.
But I wonder the extent to which the employers that are requiring their people back in the office, fine, I'll badge in, I'll give my badge to somebody else and let them badge out for me. So there's a double trip, unfortunately. I think this is one of the the downsides. I've also found that employers are more resistant about flex time than they are about flex day of the week, which to me would be a good solution to this peak traffic kind of thing. So, and I don't quite know why. It's odd. They want to put a.
That's always puzzled me too. We've had compressed work schedule options for decades, 980, 440, and those are accessible even to people whose jobs don't permit teleworking. Because I always think about, what about those folks whose jobs aren't amenable? They sort of get disadvantaged compared to as information workers who can largely choose time and place. Yeah, and why companies, it still requires a bit more management effort, but a 440 that instantly reduces 20% of the commute trips.
Right,
980, 10%. I mean, that's pretty hefty. So let's do more of that.
But I mean, even the mom that wants to come in late so that she can drop the children at daycare and work later as a result or whatever, it just seems like that would make a lot more sense, and it would go a long way to help those people who don't have the option to telework.
Do you, either one of you, have good information about the impact of all that's happening in this sphere on sustainability? Are there some really good? Is there some really good data on emissions? And I would also say that my own professional bias is that we don't even have that good data on ride sharing, some of the modes of ride sharing, because if you have a ride share, sometimes you're still picking up idling, or two people have to drive to somewhere to join it, or van pooling is the same, and transit maybe too. But if you can talk from your experience in this area, what do we see as a change in emissions?
I can speak to that. One of my recent PhD graduates, now doing a postdoc at MIT, did her dissertation exactly on the impact of telework on vehicle miles driven. And admittedly, it was 2021 data. We're in the process of replicating it on at least 2023 data, and it was full day teleworking only. So as we just were discussing, partial day is not to be ignored, but still, those supplementers, sorry, I keep getting my own labels confused, the substituters who work part of the day at home and then go into the workplace, who make the most trips, they're still only about 10%, less than 10% of teleworking days are done in that fashion. So even though they're the culprits, generating more travel than perhaps they would if they weren't teleworking, they're still the minority. So on net, the question has always been, what's happening in the aggregate, because you can come up with all kinds of reasons why teleworking might actually stimulate more travel. We've touched on most of them already: residential relocation to a more distant home and a longer commute, the non-work travel generation. So now that I don't have to commute, I'll suddenly start making all kinds of other trips. Mode shifts could be a part of it. So now I'm not, in a position where transit's a, useful commute option for me. So I'm going to start driving alone, whereas I used to take, so all kinds of suspects, if you will, could generate more travel. So that's been a standing question for a while. And I'd been convinced that on net teleworking reduces travel. Our early pre-pandemic studies were showing that, the diaries you were alluding to, even looking at household members' travel and so forth. But the pandemic comes along and other people were claiming other things. So my student Shani took a look at it for a dissertation and showed conclusively, in my opinion, again, that teleworking on net reduces travel. What was interesting was she could look at individual level and show that, sure, for some people it increased their travel. So I keep saying everybody can be right. The reason we have all these conflicting stories is they're all right. The question is, what's the net impact of all these opposite directions of impact? And the net is to reduce travel. So we didn't take it as far as emissions, but if it's reducing vehicle miles driven markedly as it is, then I'm convinced that it's also contributing to reducing emissions.
Yeah, but if
go
I
ahead.
may, I don't remember the name of the study, but it was a really good one. And it looked at all the things people are typically critical about. Oh, you didn't count this and you didn't count that and everything else. I can't remember the name of it. I'll send it to Elham when I see it. But one of the things, there had already been these reports that, in fact, remote work was increasing VMT. This one showed that while that may or may not be the case, I mean, VMT had gone up, vehicles mile traveled, it reduced idling. And so idling being a worse pollutant, that effect was that it was actually reducing greenhouse gases.
Okay, excellent. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about where does top talent choose to live and work, because obviously everybody wants to make sure I hope everybody wants to make sure that they're retaining their top talent or recruiting it. And does commuting factor into those decisions?
Yeah, very much so. You want to take it, Pat?
No, I would like for you to start and I'll chime in.
Okay, yeah. There's actually almost a linear relationship between the length of the commute and the intention to quit. And so the longer the commute, the more likely they are to be willing to take another job. Aside from work-life balance, and I think it's actually part of work-life balance, it's the most stressful time of a person's day. There have been studies shown to do that. And so it was one of the biggest reasons, and continues to be one of the biggest reasons, that people don't want to come back into the office. That phrase I used earlier, earn the commute. I'm not going to schlep for an hour in traffic to sit here and do what I could be doing at home. So it's very much a part of it. And I think the other part of the talent issue is that some of the companies the reason they've doubled down on it is because they've learned they can hire the best and the brightest from anywhere. You're not going to, if you want to have the best and the brightest at your company, you can't limit it to an hour commute, right? They live everywhere. And so we are seeing a lot more of that.
Thank you. That was excellent. And actually, before I go on, but let me ask you this question and then ask you a broader question, which is, how much do you think hybrid work is impacting the central business district? Because we've got a lot of cities complaining about not there being as much traffic, and as a result, economic development in core city centers, which a lot was designed around. So what do you see as the role of the CBD? Is it changing? And maybe how can we circumvent that? And yeah, is a CBD as important as it used to be? A central business district again. I hate to use
yeah.
acronyms.
I'm going to take first.
Sure.
Okay. San Francisco is the poster child for the demise of a city center as a result of the move to work from home. This is one of the things that, like, I don't know if you saw it coming, Pat, or you saw it coming, Elham. That came out of left field for me, the demise of the cities as a result of this. But of course, it happened because it was overnight. You know, had it not, none of us were ever saying everybody should just like work from home right now. But that's what happened. And as a result, office vacancies went up. They're still at record highs. And there's a flight to quality. So the B properties are being hurt more than the A properties. There's that snowball effect of that then there's more bankruptcies. Investors are not willing to invest in office real estate. The building values are lower because the rents are lower. Double whammy on transit because now the tax dollars aren't going to support transit. And at least at the beginning of the return to office, people were afraid. I mean, city tax dollars were down, and a lot of the transportation alternatives were really suffered. And had to limit schedules. You know, this whole thing just sort of snowballs. Crime went up, retail went down. A lot of the companies that I work with are having trouble getting their employees to come in. They're having to put in food service because the restaurants in the regional areas have gone out of business.
Pat, did you want to address that?
Yeah, I agree with everything Kate said, but to add, it is there are geographical variations. So I think some cities have bounced back with CBD retail and so forth. Transit nationwide, I saw a report from APTA recently, the American Public Transit Association, indicating that the aggregate statistics are quote unquote only 15% lower than they were pre-pandemic. So meaning that, they were way lower than that for several years during and after the pandemic. So they have risen back quite a bit. And again, sad to say, transit ridership was on a long-term decline even before the pandemic. So it's sort of hard to sort out what will be back to normal. And I always think of a quote that I learned long ago in graduate school by a person named William White, who said, "You can't repeal the geometry of the center." And he was referring to what back in the 1970s was the flight of company headquarters to the suburbs of Connecticut or whatever. And, CBDs didn't dive in. After 9/11, it was like, oh my gosh, target rich environments, high rises. Is this going to be the death of the central business district? And I don't think they died in the intervening almost quarter of a century. So yes, we're in a short-term churn situation. I like to think and suspect that in the long run, they will return to vitality. But as always, there are a lot of other factors involved with San Francisco, terribly expensive, homelessness, other factors that contribute to, maybe I don't want to go downtown, at the moment. So I think it's incumbent on city leaders to think about how to make that central business district attractive and keep people wanting to be there. Hopefully, over time, we'll have more of a mix of housing with office space, and that'll be great for commuting and for vibrant downtown life and so forth. So I think, a lot of people have a lot of money riding on making CBDs work, and that they'll figure it out over time.
And just one point, I follow the real estate market and the adaptive use of businesses, business structures and buildings, meaning that how are we changing that? And two things I want to point out, New York and San Francisco are starting to make improvements, and the occupancy level is going up in both cities. It's percentages, but it's still notable. And almost every building that, is vacant that comes up, they are adding more multi-use, facets and aspects to it. So to your point, Pat, that yes, they are adding housing and affordable housing. So these are important. Okay, let's go
I
to,
think one other thing,
Right.
Elham, on
Yes.
that is that, and Pat alluded to it, that it's very different from one city to the other.
yes,
And one of the things that made cities more resilient is if they had a very mixed use mix.
to begin with.
So if they would double down on business, then they were going to be hurt more. And in particular, that vicious cycle of the tax dollars.
Yes.
The cities get a lot of money from the taxes that are charged to people who now aren't going into the city. And some of the states have gotten very, very serious about if you work for a New York company and you come in to lunch for a New York company, then you owe us taxes for that 2 hours that you were in. So there's this sort of, it all comes down to money.
It does. So let's be a little futuristic. We're approaching the end of this portion of our programming. And do you see a role for telework and hybrid use and also compressed work weeks and all that on business continuity, especially as we ponder upon the World Cup coming to Atlanta? And what do you think would be good uses?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I love this question because one of the early studies of teleworking we did, and Elham knows we lived through it together, the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. And, teleworking played a role even then. So I think in every disaster I've read about since then, companies were saying, oh, thank God we can telework. And of course, after the disaster was cleaned up and over, until the pandemic, it was back to work, people, back to the office,
Yes.
thank God we can come back to the office. But the pandemic, of course, broke that. I don't think we're going back to pre-pandemic ways ever fully. And so I do think businesses are much better equipped to have people telework during, more than usual, shall we say, during times of tremendous strain on the transportation network. I just think back to how Georgia Tech would handle days in which, I don't know, there'd be some big game down the street or a presidential motorcade coming through, or whatever, blizzard, and they'd be like, go home early today, people, or, the campus is closed tomorrow. Now it's tomorrow's an remote instruction day, and let your staff telework this afternoon. So we're complaining there's no more snow days ever, where they'll close campus because of snow. It'll be physically closed, but we're still open for business. So again, I think that's been a permanent change in the way we think and do. And so I have a feeling that that will come into major play during the World Cup.
Sure. And Kate, do you want to say anything else on that before we give Ranja the chance to take back the programming?
Sure. Yeah, just one thing that a lot of people don't realize, the first government requirement for telework, and it was actually that people should telework to the maximum extent possible. This was 2010, I believe. Was the threat of bird flu. So, it has been the cornerstone of the government's telework program since the very beginning. Booz Allen did a study, I think, prior to 2010 that said the government could pay for its entire 5-year cost of rolling out an extensive telework program with the offset of one snow day.
Excellent. So if it's okay, at this point, I'm gonna, stop this portion of the program, and Ranja, it's back to you. Thank you so much. You're both so astute, so inspiring, and you are what is, kept at least this area of research alive for those of us who are enthusiasts in it.
Right back at you, Elham.
Yes,
If
indeed.
if it's okay, can I ask one more question that I thought would be, I know that, we had so many great things that we talked about and we went a little bit over time, but I think it's a piece of question that I want to make sure that we ask so that our audience can, go home with like a piece of advice. I think it was one of the last questions. If you could give employers one piece of advice to stay competitive in the next 5 to 10 years, as hybrid evolves, especially in that space, what would it be? So I want to make sure that we get that so that we can have a little bit of a takeaway for the audience.
Kate, it's yours.
Train your managers to manage by results, not by butts and seats. And
Yeah,
that's just from the beginning, that has been the biggest holdback. Managers not trusting their people. And it doesn't matter whether it's telework or 100% on-site work. You don't know that they're working if they're sitting in front of the desk.
and I just expand on that by saying, do the hard work of finding the happy medium. Most people don't want to telework all the time. So the trick is to finding what's the optimal amount of teleworking for each individual, which may differ from person to person, matched with the optimal amount of teleworking from the employer's side, which is also going to differ from industry to industry, even employer to employer. So yeah, it's a little bit of a dance and a, interactive adjustment here and there, and it sounds like hard work, but if you can fine tune it to where everybody's at their peak, happiness and performance, the company's better off for sure.
Excellent. And I think that goes right into our next portion of the program, talking about training and, like it's not a one shoe fits all. So I'll pass it on to Robin, who's gonna, briefly talk about our offerings for Flexwork.
All right, thank you so much, Ranja. So I would first just like to reiterate some information about Georgia Commute Options Flexwork program. The goal of the program really is to support regional employers by providing tailored strategies and training. Again, Elham and I have worked with hundreds of employers and have over 30 years of hybrid work program development expertise. And the best part is that these services are provided at absolutely no cost to regional employers. Next slide. So we really do try and meet you where you are. And our services are completely customizable. So if you're at the beginning of the process, we can assist with your formal policy and agreements, including productive habits like do's and don'ts, facilitating those leadership discussions with HR, IT, legal, and management, just to understand needs and concerns, and just work through overcoming management objections. And then in terms of program design, we can help including defining eligibility criteria, setting those expectations with availability, communication, and performance. In terms of technology and tools review, including collaboration tools, cybersecurity needs, and things like that. As far as communications, like developing messaging for rollout, designing, supporting, and launching pilot programs. And if you're in the expanding phase, we definitely help with policy refinement. So updating or expanding your hybrid work policies to cover consistency across departments, expectations for on-site days, equipment provisioning. And then in terms of program evaluation, like reviewing your current practices and identifying gaps. And then manager and staff training, which is so important, as Kate just indicated. We can help train your managers to be able to better manage hybrid and remote work teams, communication and team cohesion, equity in hybrid environments. All of these things are included in our training sessions. And then tool optimization, we can help recommend upgrades or better use of the existing tools. And then scalability planning. So helping HR and IT scale and support models as more employees participate in your program. And then metrics and key performance indicators. So establishing ways to really just track the success of your program, management, engagement, productivity, retention, things like that. If you're in the phase where you're just trying to tune up things, as many people are nowadays, program evaluation and surveys or focus groups, we can help you gather the feedback from managers and staff. We can help review that data and performance outcomes, policy or practice adjustments that might need to be made, fine-tuning those expectations around availability, communication norms, and address specific issues or team dynamics. We can help with advanced training or refreshers, leadership development, again, for managing hybrid teams, team building focus in a hybrid model, things like that. We can also help with change fatigue and culture reinforcement. So basically just reigniting that enthusiasm, addressing the quiet quitting or disengagement trends, things like that. Troubleshooting, resolving technical adoption challenges, customizing solutions for specific departments or roles. And then, of course, episodic planning. So in cases like the 2026 World Cup Games, we can help with business continuity, short policy and agreement situations, technology and tools, and productive habits and deterrence, specifically during those episodic times. So if you think that there's anything that we can assist with, you can certainly email us directly at telework@gacommutoptions.com. And that email will also be displayed at the end of this presentation, and I think we can put it in the chat as well. That's telework@gacommutoptions.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Yeah, Robin and Elham, you'll be in good hands working with them. So whatever you are, they'll meet you where you are. I think we are at the portion where it's Q&A. We have a few minutes. If anyone have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can, let us know. I think there was one that came in at the earlier start of the interview portion, where someone commented that their C-suite want to boost collaboration. So that's why they're requiring everyone to go back into the office in January. I think some of the answers that our speakers provided did touch on that, but if you have anything additional you'd like to add, Dr. Mokhtarian and Kate, please, or Elham or Robin, please feel free to chime in, whether that's true, collaboration would be, returning into the office would help boost that. Any thoughts on those? Feel free to chime in.
They also said that open offices, big floors, big empty spaces where people worked was going to increase collaboration. It didn't. The research is out there. You can collaborate just as well in person as you can in the office. In fact, distant collaboration, remote collaboration can bring new voices into the conversation. So, the introvert that you don't hear from during a meeting that isn't willing to put their hands up, the bully in the room who, grandstands and doesn't let anybody else talk. There are other avenues now within this kind of interface where people can feel comfortable typing things into the chat without actually having to say something, contribute on shared documents that are shared after the event. The one thing they found is that complex collaboration, and if you really got to, heads down on something complex, is better performed in the office. But you just can't make the unilateral statement that it's better, because there's just no data to prove it.
So
I would, if I can, I'm sorry, Pat, were you going to say something?
that was
You
go
go ahead
Elham.
first. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be quick. I think part of the error in making assumptions is that we're assuming a lot of things that may just be a perception. So I think it would make sense to do some research first to see if collaboration is a problem as expressed by managers or as expressed by employees. And, either survey them or do focus groups or, find a way to document it first before letting, I mean, the C-suite just assume, yes, this is what will happen. Because we've made a lot of assumptions that aren't true. So I like doing a fact-finding mission first. Go ahead, whoever I cut off rudely before.
It wasn't rude. I was starting to unmute myself. I agree. I do see the value in face-to-face communication. However, so again, not one size fits all. I love the fact-finding mission importance. But I do find that even companies that are fully distributed, if you will, fully remote, have these get-togethers, once, twice, 3 times a year, which frankly, as a transportation person, I'm intensely curious about what the carbon footprint is of flying people from all over the country to anywhere in the country or some other exotic place in the world a few times a year or even once a year to meet, as opposed to having everybody in one location most of the time. So, I think even if you're all remote all the time, there is a vast literature on something called tacit knowledge. That is the unwritten rules, norms, knowledge, information, juice, gossip, whatever forms it takes, and it's many forms, happens most easily when people are bumping into each other at random. Yes, you can certainly formalize that and have drop-in sessions or tea times or whatever online. I still myself, and maybe, I don't know if Kate and Elham agree, but I still feel like you can't fully replace in-person interactions all the time, and that some of that's needed. So again, I come back to what's the happy medium, right? So how much is needed for any given company, any given period of time, any given project, any given set of people working on a project, and that requires data, as Elham so astutely called for.
Yeah, keep an eye on Atlassian's data. They put out some really good stuff. And one of the things they studied is the extent to which monthly or quarterly or half-year get-togethers increase trust. And it turns out the sweet spot is somewhere around every 3 months if people can get together. And then that trust lasts for another 3 to 6 months, that level of trust. So, we're finding a whole new market, a whole new way of doing things that can lead to strengthening those missing bonds that you get when you're face to face with somebody.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you to our speakers. It was very insightful. We will have a post-survey webinar that we will send immediately after this, and it's also dropped in the chat. So please feel free to respond to that and give us your feedback. And thank you, speakers. Thank you, attendees. Thank you, everyone. This was really great. And can you go to the next slide page? So everyone, there's also that's the telework email. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun.
Take care. That was great.
Thank you.